Coming up on this episode of Tom Talks Rubbish.
You make people feel special because they have a reason to be promoted. You're asking questions about WrestleSphere or Give Me a Hull. Yeah, you're making people and their platforms feel valuable, and
Mm,
that's important. Whether they've got 100 subscribers or 100,000 subscribers, and you've got people with both on your channel.
mm.
Um, you're making people feel important and feel valued, and fundamentally, as a life skill, I would argue that one of the unifying things for us all, not to get too philosophical, is that
Mm.
we all want to feel valued, Tom.
Yeah,
So in summary, your legacy is that you made people as a storyteller on YouTube and as the wrestling journalist, you made people feel valued.
what's going on, guys? It's your boy, Tom Talks Trash, and stand back with a little bit of a different video rather than this being like an interview about my guest. Because as before I introduce this person, they've been on the channel many, many times. We've talked about their fandom. We're here today, really, to talk about their mentorship of me and continuing the theme of history of Tom Talks Rubbish month for March for my birthday. We're here to have Dom Smith back on from Give Me a Whole Yeah, WrestleSphere, SoundSphere, and now ScreamSphere to discuss and wobbling about and rocking out where basically he saw the channel going when we first connected, where he sees the channel going now, and everything in between. So welcome back on the show, my friend.
Hi, mate. Good to see you. It's a pleasure to be back as always. Hello, everybody.
That was a terrible pitch. I'm not gonna lie, that was a terrible pitch. But Dom knows what I mean, don't you?
I do, mate. I do. Yeah, it's like I say, it's good to be back right here on Tom Talks Rubbish. I think it's good to see you've grown and developed, and we'll talk about it today.
So you talked about me growing and developing there, Dom.
Hmm.
What was the first piece of content you discovered of mine?
I think for me, the fact you had a disability and a difference was what drew me to you. I
Mm-hmm.
think equally, I've seen you do interviews with developing creators such as ourselves, and I've seen you do interviews with, some of the biggest names in wrestling journalism.
Mm-hmm.
SRS, Nick Houseman, etc. So, I've seen your name pop up in different circumstances, WWE presses, things like that. People have mentioned you and stuff. So it's clear your name got out, has got out and you've kind of expanded over the years. But in terms of the first content that I really kind of engaged with, it was your intention. It was your intention to support us that really inspired me, and the fact
Mm.
you wanted to support us, and the fact you invested in not only Give Me a Whole Yeah, but also wobbling about and rocking out. I would say those are the things that drew me to you. And I think, obviously we text now, and you asked me for advice and things. So I think we've developed I would say absolutely we've developed a friendship,
Oh yeah, I would agree.
which is fascinating. It's a digital world we live in now. And I'm still looking forward to giving you a hug when I first meet you properly. But
I hope so.
I do consider you a friend, and I'm very proud of what you've done. But in terms of that first, in terms of how you've grown from interviewing developing creators such as ourselves to interviewing some of the biggest names again in wrestling journalism, I would say, that's what inspired me about your work when you first started, and in terms of your growth
Mm.
and where, and what you've been able to do since then. I think it's been incredible, mate.
I really appreciate that, man. What was the first piece of content you saw though? Was it the Adam interview?
Yeah, I think it would have been. It might have been the Adam interview. There was quite a few. I mean, obviously all the stuff with the Cultaholic guys, because you got to remember that there's not a lot of channels out there that were interviewing and are interviewing those people. There's not a lot of
Mm.
people that gained access to them. I know in the pandemic it was more possible because there was more free time, but certainly post and pre-pandemic, nobody was interviewing the Cultaholic guys, and nobody was interviewing members of these big level wrestling
Mm.
journalism organizations. So I think it was just seeing you do that and seeing you have a different spin on
Mm.
wrestling journalism, as I always call you, the wrestling
Yeah.
journalist. And so yeah, I think that stuff was what drew me to you, as well as the stuff you did for us first off as well.
How did you feel though? Because I look back on this, and this is really unprofessional. But how did you feel that you had to? How do I phrase this? You had to do some of the work, if you know what I mean. You had to set up all the links for me and things like that. How did you feel about that at the time?
I think I understood why I was doing it at the time. I think if you were asking me to do it now, I'd be a little bit, I would probably feel differently about it. But like, I think at the time I understood it. And at the time I understood, and especially because I needed a lot of help when I was starting out. I wasn't bothered about it. You know, somebody else you might speak to on this channel for
Mm,
this reason, they might feel differently. Like I say, I encourage people in my work and in my daily life to be as independent as possible because that was how I was encouraged. Obviously, there
yeah.
was a lot of people when I was younger being in a wheelchair and walking with two sticks. That would do a lot of things for me, and that's
Mm,
fine. But it doesn't really bode well as you get older and you start to run your own businesses or your own projects or your own YouTube channel. So for me, at first I felt happy doing it because I understood you were learning, but as time has gone on, I've seen you take more autonomy and create more of your own links, opportunities, connections, etc. And that's exactly what I would want for you. I do not, I would not want you to be relying on other people when you don't need to. Of course, you've now
mm.
moved into your own, your own supported living and things like that. So you've got your own life now, and that is something that you've worked very, very hard for, and I'm proud of you. So going back to the original question, I didn't mind it at the time because I knew that you would grow and develop. I think if we were having the same conversations we were having a few years ago now, I would feel differently. But certainly you've grown and developed, and certainly you've learned to do things yourself, which I think is important
Mm.
for everybody, not just a YouTube creator or somebody with a disability.
I would fully agree with that. And to be honest, man, I know that I think I thought about this the other day. I lost out on some pretty big guests that were like, if you're not the way they phrased it, and I've spoken to them since, and I've had them on since, but basically their phrasing was, if you're not prepared to put the work in, I'm not going to do the interview, if that makes sense, because they felt that they had to do all the work, and I look back now, and it's like, yeah, I'd probably be the same way now. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah, yeah, it makes sense, and I understand that. I think it's different because you and I, you know, we have a little bit more of a personal connection, and I think even back then, I saw a lot of, because we have we have a disability, we have a difference, and we work, or we're always trying to work in the media, trying to work on
Mm.
YouTube. So I saw a lot of myself in you at the start, and I think I was trying to support you, and I knew other people wouldn't have that patience. You
Yeah,
know,
and I think
I,
that's the
I
thing.
yeah, I think if we were doing it now, I would probably say the same thing. If we were still having the same conversations, but we're not because you're doing it yourself. And I think people
Mm.
need to be, and obviously it works differently for different people. Anthony might have a different approach, for example, than you or I. It depends on situation, it depends on circumstance, it depends on severity of different disability. So there are reasons why somebody might need help, but with you, I knew that you could do it,
Mm.
and you have done, but it might have taken you a little longer than perhaps you wanted to. But I think it's very important that those people said what they said to you because it obviously taught you a
Yeah,
valuable lesson.
because I think also we have to remember, man, I don't believe I had this laptop that we're recording on now. I think, if memory serves me correctly, I did the Adam interview, then I did our good friend Anthony Talks from uh, Anthony from the Anthony podcast, and then I did you. And those
Yeah.
three were all recorded on my iPad. If memory
Yeah.
serves me correctly, you might be able to correct me on this, but
Well,
I think
I
that
seem
was
to
correct.
remember. I seem to remember some conversations around the iPad and around getting it sorted, which again is why I took. I'm hesitant, Tom, to use the word sympathy because I don't really believe in that. You
But I
know,
know what you mean. You sort of
empathy more than
gave
sympathy.
gave me
Yeah,
some rope, if you know what I mean. Gave
yeah,
me some, yeah,
it's empathy more than sympathy, if that makes sense.
yeah, definitely.
I, I, I think, like I say, you work with a lot of creators that have differences, disability, of course. Omer,
Mm,
Anthony, as you know, people have different needs, and that's
Mm,
okay. They have different reasons to need support, and we have to be mindful of that, you know.
mm.
But like I said, I can completely understand why those people said those things, you know, to support you. And like I say, an iPad, in retrospect, probably not the best way to do what you're doing, but it gave you a start, and
Exactly.
it set you going, which I think is important.
Mm. Do you remember the first interview then, Dom, that was like, the boy's got it now. He knows what he's doing.
Yeah,
The first one you watched.
to be honest, there's quite a few. I mean, I knew you'd made it when you achieved your dream, and you'd done, you know, Chris, and you'd done, you know, these people. Like I say, even, you know, having the intros done by the Cultaholic guys. You know,
Mm,
I knew that you understood the business of YouTube, and you know, getting the right voices, and that because you not. It's not only about being on screen. It's not only about presenting in the way that you do, asking questions. It's about understanding what's going to hit. You know,
mm,
you have the right guests. You have like Alex, Queen of the Ring. You know, you have, you know, there's the Will Washington, who's of course you know, represented in AEW. You know, and
mm.
obviously people have viewed your videos, but you know, and regularly. But the people you're getting, of course, you remember like, you know. Adam Pacitti, nobody interviews him. You know, SRS, very difficult to get
We don't
hold
need
of.
to talk about that, the Pachuti one. We don't need to talk about that.
But the point is, like we say, I knew that you know, JD from JDNY. I think I knew that you had a vision and you were doing your best to execute it.
Mm,
And I think now you've got to where you wanted to be, and
mm,
that takes time. That is a challenge to do. That is a challenge to get there.
mm,
So in terms of the ones where where I think you've made it, I think everything beyond what we did, those first interviews. I think,
mm,
you know, now you can see, you know, when you've got these people that are notable names in the industry that are not just giving you the time because you're a person with a disability and a difference. I think
mm.
that's really, really key. A lot of people have zero idea, for example, that I have a disability or a difference unless I go and do face-to-face WWE,
A lot of
AEW
people
interviews.
didn't. I had
Yeah.
this conversation with some. Sorry, dude, I completely
No, of course.
interrupted you there.
No,
A
you're okay.
lot of people, it wasn't until somebody wanted to do an interview reasonably late UK time recently as
Right.
we record this sort of thing. And I had to be upfront and honest and say, because I don't advertise is the wrong word, but Dom will know what I mean. I don't put it out there that I've got cerebral palsy. Maybe I should. That'd be a question for you, Dom. Should I?
That's a really, I mean, we've talked about this in private a few times. I think it's different. It's difficult. I think if that you want that to be your identity,
Not
then
really.
well, there's your answer then. I think if you want it to be your identity, then you can say, I've got cerebral palsy, you know, that could be a part and a factor of our interviews.
Mm,
And maybe you would get more, you know, there's an arguable point. Maybe people would, you know, maybe you'd get more interviews, but then I would question why you were getting the interviews then.
that
Is it
that's
more,
why that's what I'd get stuck on. Do you know what I
yeah,
mean?
is it more about the quality, or is it more about the fact that people want to, you know, there's a
The
sympathy there.
sympathy, yeah.
And there's a difference, Tom, as you know, between sympathy and empathy, and that's what I was talking about before. You know, I had empathy for you, I didn't have sympathy for you. You know, I had empathy, so I understood you were developing as a creator, so I had empathy for you, but I wouldn't, you know, that if you again, if you was emailing me now to set up your interviews, I wouldn't have sympathy for you. Do you know what I mean? I'd be like,
Yeah.
why can't you do it yourself? You know what
Mm.
I mean? So I think that's important. There's an important distinction there, and I understand if people want to use their disability and their differences and identity. That's absolutely their choice. What, you know, fair enough. But it's not been something that I mean, I might mention it in interviews if it's appropriate to do
Mm.
so. If somebody's mentioning challenges, for example, but very rarely is it a part of my identity. As you know, when most of our interviews are done like this,
Yeah.
you wouldn't know either of us particularly, you know, had cerebral palsy to varying degrees. So yeah, it's an interesting question. In answer to that question though, if it's not part of your identity, I wouldn't do it.
Mm. I
If you
understand.
don't want it to be part of your identity,
Yeah,
because
yeah,
I think personally and in your personal life, of course, people see it. It's like me, you can't really not see it, you
yeah.
know, when I'm walking around or whatever. Um, but I think here you can have a different identity. You can be Tom Talks Rubbish, the wrestling journalist. You don't have
Yeah.
to be Tom Talks Rubbish, the disabled wrestling journalist, you know?
Mm. Yeah, and I think I'll bring it up to people like if anyone wants to record past midnight UK, I'll sort of say, look, I'm really sorry, but I need to be flat by 10:30 at latest because I've got cerebral palsy. And most of the time people go, oh, I didn't know that. Like, that's fine. And like, we'll do it another time, sort of thing. So I don't include it in the emails or message, but I do explain it if I have to, is the way I'll
Yeah,
phrase it.
yeah, it's the same. And I understand, of course, people watching this, different people watching this, obviously you'll have an audience with people with disabilities and differences, you know. That so if they want to use that as part of their identity, absolutely go for it. It's not for me or you to say how anybody else
Oh,
should
God, no.
should run a channel or indeed their personal life. But I think what's key is we're celebrating your channel and we're looking at your channel, and what you've done hasn't been defined in most part. I mean, I know you've done the video, the care company video, for example, 3 years ago around that time,
Four nearly.
but it's not,
Jeez.
it doesn't have to define what you do. And I think that's important. There's a distinction. It can do if you want to
Mm.
tomorrow, you know, you could absolutely have it do that, but it doesn't have to. And I
No,
think
and
I think it's important to have that option. That
yeah.
option, you know what I mean? I can absolutely use, like Wobbling About and Rocking Out was about disability and difference and
Mm.
neurodiversity and telling those stories. But they don't, those two aren't necessarily, that's not necessarily linked with being a wrestling fan on Give Me a Whole Yeah. So you can have different identities.
I understand that completely. You brought up some other projects there that we've done together. So
Mm.
after our first interview, pal, what was it that made you reach out to me and go, do you want to come on my show? Do you want to come on my disability show? Was there something you saw in me? I'll put it that way.
Well, I think so. Yeah. I mean, I think we talked about this again off record. I wanted to give you a shot on a different platform. I also wanted to, I think your story is valuable. You've appeared a number of times across different channels talking about disability and difference and stuff. So I think your experience is really, really valuable in that on that level. So that's
Mm,
why it was, in terms of your skill, I think, as I say, I think you've expanded and developed as an
mm.
interviewer. But I think for me it was like it's an excuse, as I said off record today. These are part interviews
Oh,
and
definitely.
part excuse to hang out. So there's an element of that. It's nice to see you, but also I think yeah, I saw something in you, and I think the skills you've applied from those times are readily available in your interviews that you've done most recently. And like I say, people. Like your SRSs, people like the Cultaholic guys wouldn't be working with you if you weren't good at what
Mm.
you do, and they wouldn't give you the time if they didn't want to be there.
What is starting to become weird for me, and I don't know if you've had this as a content creator, Dom, is like when I email someone and I just get back, Tom, I know who you are. Of course I'll come on. That's still particularly when I've never interacted with them before. It's like, okay, maybe I am getting out there. That's strange, but moving on.
Yeah, well, I think absolutely you are. Like we said, I was at the a couple of WWE events last year, or last year, and then I've been at some other events as well. And your names come up. People do know who you are, and I think it's one of those things, in terms of what's next for your channel, and we'll talk about that in a minute. I do think there is possible ability for you to do wrestler interviews and work with, bigger wrestling organizations and platforms, but what's key for that, and the reason why I bring that up is because while it would be nice if you could show up to, if you can be at these events and stuff like that, you don't have to be to get your name out
Mm,
there. You can still be known. You and I have talked about the logistics of getting to those events and what you would need to do that.
mm.
Website, decent traffic, features, etc., which we've discussed off record. And I still think that is where you need to go down the
Yeah.
line if you want to take it up another level, is have that quality website with quality features in the same way that a Chris Van Vliet does, or a Denise Salcedo, or and I do. Obviously we have WrestleSphere, SoundSphere, ScreenSphere websites as well as YouTube channels. So I do think that's where you need to go. But I also think that this is a perfect example. And I use this, I've spoken to Anthony about this as well. Anthony Talks. It's an example of you don't need to always be in the room to be
Yeah.
noticed. You know, there are other ways in this digital age, post-pandemic age that we live in, that you can do big level interviews. And I think, that's what your future holds.
You brought up big level interviews there. Who is the one that you I don't know if you subscribe to my channel. That's a bit awkward to ask that
Of
question.
course, I subscribe to your
But
channel.
right. When the notification's gone on and or you've seen it on social media and you've gone, my boy's got that one. That's really cool.
Man, there's loads of them. There's absolutely loads of them. I mean, the fact that you got JD from MY, who doesn't talk very public. I mean, apart from his own channel, SRS, I know was such a huge one for you to get. You know, big
Mm.
big deal. I love Matt from Assemble. I think he's great. I love his content. So
That
you
was
know,
fun.
yeah, watching those are really really good because a lot of the people you're interviewing are people that I watch. You know,
Mm.
Ross Tweddle, of course, a legend in YouTube, YouTube content. You know, I think there's some really good sort of stuff that I've watched that is a little bit left of center. Obviously, people could talk about Chris Van Vliet, and you can talk about the fact you've done that, which I think is, that was your
Oh yeah.
goal. But I love Stephen Larson, and I think you've built up a good relationship with them. I
Mm.
think that's really, really important. But there are other people on the channel that, of course, I'll mention. And if anybody's a part of, the Bray Wyatt community and the Fireflies, that you gave a platform to that I've worked with, and that was, of course, Jody Gilly, who passed away.
Yeah. Mm.
The fact that you have that on your channel, I want people to go back to that years from now and remember what a great presence
Mm.
Jody was, and the fact you had Jody on the channel was really really cool because she was and is still a motivational presence within the community, particularly the fandom, of course, of Bray and Uncle Howdy and and the universe that I am also a part of now. So the
Mm.
fact you had Jody and you were spotlighting not only your bigger creators through your history, if you go way back, into your world, into your content, you
Have you
are.
pulled the archives up by any chance?
This is the thing. This is the thing. I've got to do my research, man. You got to understand. I mean, I know certain parts of it, obviously, because you were interviewing people like Alex. When I was interviewing people like Alex, I'm talking about Alex McCarthy here. But a
Mm.
lot of the same people that appeared on Gimme a Whole Year in those early days were around, and we were doing them as well. But you got to remember the key thing about being a journalist, Tom. What's the key thing about being a journalist? What do you need to do? What are people most thankful for?
The time?
Yeah, partly.
I,
Give me another
I don't
one.
know where we're going with that.
Well, I just said it. It's research.
Oh yeah, the
But
research.
if I'm going to come on here, then and I know your content. I've been a subscriber for a long time, and I've commented on your videos before.
Mm.
I've commented on loads of your videos, so I'm subscribed. But I think it's important to remember that as a lesson for any journalists that are watching this, people will be most thankful for doing your research. It doesn't matter if
Mm.
you're interviewing your mate. It doesn't matter if you're interviewing someone you know. It doesn't matter if you're interviewing someone you don't know. You need to be researching. You need to be knowing. So yes, I'm pulling some of this from memory and I'm pulling some of it from the archives
Mm.
because I'm doing my due diligence.
No, I understand that completely, my friend. You talked about the archives then. I'm curious to know, as I said to you, this will air in March of 2025. So who is somebody that you're like, maybe if you got them back on again, you'd be able to do, I hate the word better, but you know what I mean.
You and I have talked about this a lot as well. I don't really have many regrets in terms of the interviews I've done. There's certainly interviews that I would do better, and there was certainly interviews that I would, maybe I would scrub from memory completely, and I would, maybe try and do them all over again. However, they have taught me to be better.
Mm.
So, for example, let's have a look at let's think about this, right? So there are times when I wasn't necessarily looking at the camera as much as because I,
Mm.
I have trouble with eye contact and things like that. And also I've only just got a computer that brings my camera up here. And because I have scoliosis, sometimes it brings me down here.
Yeah.
But I think one of the most important things you can do as an interview is obviously try and look at the person you're talking to. And so I learned to do that. And being on camera, it's very different. I can do that face to face. I can do that face to face because
Yeah.
you sat in front of someone, you're like, right, okay. right? But on a computer, you got to look up here. You're not really looking at the. So for me to be at, the camera level, I got to be up here. But you're here on my screen, you see? So
Yeah.
little things like that. And obviously, like I had a laptop before, and I only, like I say, I've only just transitioned from laptops. So, little things like that, I've learned and I'm still learning that it's going to make me better at my job by upgrading my equipment, by upgrading my, sorry to cause an audio issue, but a decent microphone, obviously getting, investing in a decent computer with a decent camera. Also,
Mm.
if that doesn't work, have I got a webcam? I've got a webcam as a backup, and I think going back to your original question, I've seen you do the same thing. You mentioned you mentioned getting a laptop over an iPad. You've got to, if you're going to do this, you've got to do it well. There's a million YouTubers and there's
Yeah.
certainly a million wrestling YouTubers. I think you have a niche because you're the wrestling journalist. I think I have a niche because I'm working in accessibility. I'm working in film. I'm working in television. I'm working in music as well. So you've got to really work to carve your niche, but you've also got to be good. And I think
Mm.
you learnt to be good.
Mm.
Because, and if you weren't good, then, SRS wouldn't have given you his time. The people from Cultaholic wouldn't have given you their time. Chris Van Vliet certainly wouldn't have given you
Oh,
his time.
definitely not.
I got Chris Van Vliet because it was the pandemic. I got Simon Miller because it was the pandemic. I'm not saying they wouldn't come back on if I asked them to, but, the fact you got them as the wrestling journalist outside of the pandemic when they're obviously very, very busy
Mm.
is very important to remember. So there's a lot to be proud of there. But so no, in answer to your question, I don't go back and go, I you know I'd go and do that again because I've learned from them. I've learned from
Mm.
every single one of them.
The one and this is an obvious one, but the one I'd love to get on again is Adam. And I'd be like, I'd actually have a format rather than just shouting at the poor man questions that just popped into my head. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah, I think there's an element of that, and one of the best things you could do as an interviewer is think on the fly. I think, you have your generic questions. Now, I like that, and I think it's a part of your segment, and I understand why you would do it. But if you're too pre-planned and you're too
Mm.
regimented, people can tell. People can tell that it's
Oh, definitely.
you've got to have an element of on the fly. But you've really
Mm.
that part of the other thing you've got to learn, and I also had to learn as a journalist going into and then becoming a counselor, is that you really need to listen to people and you really need to pick up. So if you're going to do that, if you're going to think on the fly, you got to make sure you're going to listen. You have your pre-planned questions, but also really listen to people.
Mm.
So I understand what you're saying, but again, still to this day, there's not many interviews with Adam out there, and that's something you should be really proud of.
Yeah, and I am, don't get me wrong, but there's always that nagging feeling. And this might just be my brain and the fact that it's a bit weird, but when I see that somebody's watched that video and I think there's so many more you could watch, do you know what I mean? That
But
have
they
got
may
so.
they may be doing that. They may be doing that as well. That's the point. That's the joy of having a channel like this and an archive like this. You talk about the archives. You know, that's the joy of it.
Mm.
Like as you always say at the end of your interviews, I mean, I hope so. I do think in the apocalypse, it won't matter if the internet exists or not.
Mm.
But I do. But it'll be nice to think that YouTube will exist forever in some form, and our videos will exist forever in some form, whether that's true or not. But the point is, if it is going to exist forever, then it's great to have alert. It's great to be able to chronicle how you've learned, and that's how I feel. I want people to be like, oh. Some people are going to like my interviews, some people aren't going to like them, but I know that I've got better. Do you know what I mean? And
Oh,
I think you know the same thing.
definitely. And this sounds a bit vain, but I know what I mean. I also think one thing that I'm really proud of is ever since your first interview went up on Friday, the something of July, which I cannot remember off the top of my head, we have not missed an episode since Friday at 6 p.m. That's one
Nice.
thing I'm really proud of.
There you go.
Can that's one thing Chris praised me on when he was on the show. He was like, "That's one thing I love about you. The clips that I've seen, you are consistent. It goes up once a week. I've tried the twice a week thing, but no, not good.
Yep. Consistency is key. I would say that's in this game, it's doing your research, not being a dick, and also consistency. Just be consistent with your work, and you know, because again, a million and billions of people now have YouTube channels, so
Mm.
you've got to stand out and you got to be consistent. I would say,
I,
yeah. So Chris is right.
I think what was really cool as well is we've talked about this during our wobbling about and rocking out conversation, the last one we did, which was I now have it's a very small Rolodex, don't get me wrong, but I do have a Rolodex of you, the great man that is Andy Spores, Dan Hargreaves, Anthony Talks, Anthony Naylan. I always say his last name wrong. I do apologize, my friend. But
He is a bit of an alien, so it's fine. An alien,
yeah, yeah.
yeah,
But I do have a very small Rolodex of like because when I first moved into this place, I think we had, as opposed to having like 3 months of content, I think I
mm,
was down to 2 weeks,
yeah,
something
yeah,
something like that, wasn't it? And it
yeah,
was literally Dom, please, thank you.
yeah, yeah.
Because
You're always gonna have content now, and that's the key, you know. But the key thing for you next, as we'll talk about, you know, is what how you're gonna grow, how you're gonna develop. You know, you've got a great portfolio as the wrestling journalist. So what's next for you? That's what I'm most excited about, and that's why I showed up here today is to see where your plan is to go next. You know?
really don't know. That's the thing because this I've you and I have spoken about this off camera as well.
Yeah,
This was only supposed to last to get me through lockdown. Do you know what I mean? So
yeah.
I really don't know. It could be 1 week I wake up and I'm like, I'm done. I've done what I set out to. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah,
Like,
yeah, that would be perfectly reasonable too. Uh,
I honestly don't know, Dom.
well,
Does that make
do you want to keep it up? That's the key. Do you
yeah,
still have the do
yeah.
you still have the love for it? Because if you don't
At
have the
the
love for it, then you know maybe you've done everything you set out to do, and if you're doing it just because, then I would question why you're doing it. But if you still love it, then keep it up.
Well, that actually brings me to quite a not a funny story, but like a story. I was around the time of the Chris interview and around the time of the Brian Zane interview. I was questioning him because I had my Shawn Michaels at WrestleMania 25 moment. I'm sure you know the story, Dom, of like he came backstage after the match with Taker at WrestleMania 25 and he was like, that might have been the one to end it on. Do you know what I mean? Because I don't just want to end on a whimper of an interview because not every interview can be amazing. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah, yeah,
I so it is a tricky one because it's like my Brian Zane interview, my most recent one, I thought was perfect. You know what I mean? The thumbnail
yeah,
went well, the questions went well,
yeah.
the uh editing went well, everything went well. And I did for about a week or so sit on it and be like, am I done? But then somebody else got back to me and I was like, no, this is fun. I don't think I'm going to
Yeah.
stop anytime soon.
Okay, well that's it. Just you know, I mean, if I was to ask you when it will end, how would you respond to that?
I don't know. And that's the honest answer, man. It
Okay.
could be we get these batch out that go out and I think I'm done. Like, I don't know is the honest answer, Dom. And I know it sounds like a cop out, but
No.
I don't know because I'm still having fun. Does that make sense?
Good. Yeah, it doesn't sound like a cop out at all. No, I just think I think it's interesting to think about. It's interesting to think about because again, as you know, there are musicians, there are wrestlers, there are YouTube content creators, and you can tell they're burnt out, and you can tell they don't want to do it anymore, but they just keep it up for the subscriber count or maybe the money. Not that YouTube gives you loads of money, but
No.
the point is, you know, that don't you know do it till you feel it's right.
Mm.
Don't carry it on for anybody else but yourself, is what I'm saying.
The thing is, Dom, I've learned, and that brings to a nice segue of burnout, actually. Talking
Right.
about burnout a little bit, I've learned when I'm burned out, which is, do you remember, was it 2022?
I
I
think we
got
talked about it.
I got obsessed with hitting 100 interviews
Yeah.
because I'd done really well.
Yeah.
Do you remember this?
Yeah. I think we talked about it as well. I think, yeah, the burnout was real at that point.
The
Yeah.
burnout was real, and it was more I was doing it because it was the ring, my precious, to a Lord of the Rings reference,
Yeah, man.
rather than putting out decent interviews. Back then it was. So now
Yeah.
I know when I'm burned out.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
I'm recording 2 interviews today, taking the day off on Saturday and Sunday, and then I'm recording again on Monday. Do you know what I mean?
Nice. Yeah, nice,
So
nice.
I'm I know when I'm burned out, and I think living on my own is so much better for burnout because I was doing this because I was burned out of my home life as well,
Yeah,
and
yeah.
this
You
was
need,
my escape.
yeah, you
I
needed your
think
break. Yeah.
we have to remember that as well.
Yeah, very, very, very reasonable and very understandable. A lot of people do that. I've certainly done that before. I think it's very understandable that you would do that, but you're not in this. The thing is, you've again, we're talking about your growth and development. You've grown and developed as a person.
Hmm?
There might come a day where you outgrow Tom Talks Rubbish.
Maybe,
And that
but
and
that
that would
that day hasn't come yet, is
yeah,
what
that
I'm
would
saying.
that would be okay. Do you know what I mean? Is what I'm saying
Yeah.
is you've outgrown living. Like I say, you live independently now, so you've leveled up. You've also leveled up your channel, right? So
Mhm.
like I say, you might go up a couple more levels and be like, all right, I'm good. Because if you do it, like I say, if you keep it up
Mm.
just for the sake of it, people
Mm.
will be able to tell. People
Oh,
will know,
and at
of
the let me ask you a question then, Dom, to flip the
course.
question. Do you think I'm keeping it up just for the sake of it?
No, 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 not at all. Not at all. Right now, no. I can tell you're doing it because you love it. But the point is, we're talking about a review. We're
Mm.
talking about reviewing and we're celebrating your channel.
Mm.
And that the key is, I know that you love it, but it's also nice to hear that you're thinking about yourself and your own self-care rather than I need to get to 100 videos. Oh, I need to
Yeah.
get to 100 videos. You know what I mean? You're taking care of your health,
Mm.
which is more important to
Oh,
me
definitely.
and to the community as well.
Definitely. And I think if you go back and watch interviews from late 2021, early 2022, you could tell I wasn't healthy, that I
Yeah.
was eating on the go, that I was, what's the word I'm looking for, Dom? The content came first. Does that
Yeah,
make
yeah,
sense?
yeah. Which is, people don't fundamentally people don't want that. They want you to enjoy it
Mm.
because, like we said, they can tell whether they're watching you from London or they're watching you from Brazil or they're watching you from wherever in the world. They can tell that you're not into it, and they care if you speak to any of these creators that you've spoken to, any of these globally renowned or new content creators. They'll all tell you the same thing, that their community that they've built cares about them. They care
Yeah.
about their voices. If you watch Anthony's new platform, GrimSim Labs, he's doing
Mm.
this new thing for,
Yeah.
really niche games, really niche style games. But he's got such a great community and a Discord and all these wonderful things in a community that really cares about him. He's leveled up. His YouTube experience with Gimme a Whole Year has taught him how to take it to another level. But that's also on a community thing, and that's what's taught what he's taught me is that the community, they like the content, but they can get the content, not
From
necessarily
anyone,
not
sort of thing.
necessarily yours, because you've got again the wrestling journalist
No,
niche,
but I know what you mean.
but they're more invested in you as a person than they are the content, I believe.
Mm. And I fully agree with that. So there might be a day like I get into a new relationship or I things change in my life and I think I don't have the time to do Tom Talks Rubbish anymore or the desire.
Mhm.
But now it keeps me on the straight and narrow and I enjoy it. So I don't think I'm going to stop anytime soon. Do you know
Good,
what I mean?
good. I'm really excited for the future, mate. I really am. I think it's going to be great.
I'm really glad you decided to do this, Dom, and thank you for coming on, man. I
Of
am
course.
curious to know if you could, before as we look at wrapping this up, before we do just a quick round of genetic questions, because I'm
Yep.
curious to know if you know some things about me, sort of thing. But
Oh God. All right. Okay. Let's do it.
if you could have a conversation with Tom that you did with the first interview, what would you say to him? And what do you think he'd say about where I am now?
We've just done this. I would say sort your own interviews out, do your own Zoom links, and yeah, do your own stuff. And you would say, okay, cool, I'm doing it now. Because that's what
Yeah,
you know what I mean. If I was talking to you then, I said it at the beginning of this interview, you know, you are doing what those creators, they didn't call you out, but they offered you advice. They said,
yeah.
if you're not going to put the effort in, I won't do the interview, which is very reasonable, a very
I
reasonable
don't
response.
think they worded it like that. I think there was like, look, this is just a fair
Yeah,
this is just a free piece of advice, my friend.
yeah,
I would do the Zoom links yourself.
yeah,
And
exactly.
I did. So that's the thing.
Yeah.
Quickly, Dom, before we do that genetic questions, what do you think the legacy of Tom Trubbish is if I stopped tomorrow?
I think it's the same legacy I strive for, and I think this was the last time me and you talked, and it was a short that went up yesterday. Thank you, by the way, for doing those
Yep.
wonderful shorts that you do. You and I have, I believe, the same goals in mind. I don't think of you as a YouTuber per se. I think of you as a storyteller.
YouTube's just the platform I use.
Yeah,
That's what I tell people.
I think of you as a storyteller. You give, and what's beautiful about your work is that, I look at, I go back and watch interviews you've done with Dan Hargreaves, and I go back and watch an interview you've done with Sam Smith. Now, of course, I appreciate it because you're promoting people that I care about and people that are part of my platform. However, there's a much wider impact that these videos have, because you're not just focused on your and he said Tom talked about, you're not just focused on
I know what you meant.
your Chris Van Vliets. It'll be really funny to watch you interview yourself. You're not just focused on your Chris Van Vliets and your SRSs. You're focused on guys like Dan and Sam that have never been interviewed for anything.
Mhm.
Andy Sports, they've never had an interview before. They've never done an interview before, and maybe they go back 20 years down the line and they show their grandkids or their kids, look, this is what I used to do back in the
Mhm.
day. And you've given them a platform to do that. And that's really beautiful. But, everybody could say, oh, anybody could go and interview their mates. Anybody could go and interview, Joe Blogs from the street, right? Whatever. But you make people feel special because they have a reason to be promoted. You're asking questions about WrestleSphere, or give me a whole yeah. You're making people and their platforms feel valuable. And
Mhm.
that's important, whether they've got 100 subscribers or 100,000 subscribers, and you've got people with both on your channel.
Mhm.
You're making people feel important and feel valued. And fundamentally, as a life skill, I would argue that one of the unifying things for us all, not to get too philosophical, is that
Mhm.
we all want to feel valued, Tom.
Yeah.
So in summary, your legacy is that you made people, as a storyteller on YouTube and as the wrestling journalist, you made people feel valued.
When was the first time you said the wrestling journalist? I'm just
Oh
genuinely
God,
curious.
maybe the second interview we did, 2022.
Two?
Yeah,
Yeah.
2022 sounds about right. Yeah, yeah.
Mhm. Yeah,
I
yeah.
love it though. I still
I
think
love it.
I
I
still think there should be t-shirts. I
so
still
do
think,
I.
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, stickers at
So
the very least.
so just quickly, Dom, we are going to do a round of generic questions, and I'm curious to know if you know my answers because I have said them on interviews before. So
Oh
I'm
God,
curious to
go
know
on then.
if you know my answers. So those of you that have seen my interviews before, I'm going to ask Dom a quick, little different way of doing this. If he knows my favorite match, my favorite pay-per-view card, wrestler's entrance team, tag team, and wrestler. So
Bloody hell, mate.
what do
You,
you think
you,
my favorite match is, Dom? I have told you this, by the way.
yeah, but you've caught me on a very, very intense day. These are going to be some really interesting questions. Can I just have fun with this and be like, okay, you see, I feel like the Undertaker and Michaels has to be up there. It might not be the favorite, but it's up there, right?
The second one is
There
the
you go. So that's
26s.
There you go. So that's good. That's good enough for my answer on this one, I
Mm.
think.
It is actually Dustin Rhodes versus Cody Rhodes,
There you go. We'll call it a refresh. We'll call it a refresh.
but um uh but Michael's Taker 2 was my favorite match for a
All
long time.
right, all right, okay. Let's because me and you are friends, right? We know this, yeah.
Mm.
It's all good. There's no, since we're having this little thing. Can you remember mine?
Mankind versus Undertaker.
No, close, close. There you go. It is, but okay.
It's gone,
It's
man.
no, no, it's okay. Cactus Jack Triple H.
Oh, of course it is. Yes.
Royal
Did
Rumble.
you did you know that's Dan Hargreaves' favorite match as
Yeah,
well?
yeah, 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 yeah.
Yeah.
Go on then. So you see, I think these are great questions, and I'll be interested to see, because I watch your videos, and I watch your
Mm.
videos, but I would be interested to see how many people know these answers. However, I think it's a great refresh. I think it's a great refresh for people that don't know.
My favorite pay-per-view. I, I
Jeepers.
I I don't even know this, so
Well, it's not ECW. Eliminated the ECW
December
one
to
night stand.
December.
December
No.
to December. All right. How can we rephrase how we do these?
Yeah,
Can
go
you
on.
give me multiple choice? There we go. Give me
Is
multiple
it
choice.
Revolution 2020 in AEW?
Hmm.
Is it Bragging Rights '09?
Hmm.
Is it what was the other one?
See, this is more fun.
Yeah, fair enough, dude. Is it
Well, you're thinking about it, so I know it's not that one.
I've gone. I've gone.
Revolution.
It is Revolution, actually.
Yeah.
It is Revolution, man. That pay-per-view, and I've spoke about this a few times, but that Revolution pay-per-view was the pay-per-view that I watched and went, yeah, AEW is my new favorite thing.
See, the reason why we're doing it this way, right, is because you're jogging my memory. So there we go. It's good.
Favorite theme song, and mine's quite obvious because it was my ringtone for a long time, but I don't know if you've ever heard my phone go off.
Multiple choice. Give me him. Let's go.
Batista's, Michaels, Brian Danielson, or Triple H.
Oh, I don't know. That's a three. Uh, Danielson.
Nope.
Oh,
Batista's.
that was my second choice. All right.
Because, right, do you know how I discovered the wrestling?
I can't remember the specific pay-per-view.
It was the Batista, you were supposed to be my friend, bragging
Ah,
rights
the Ray
online.
thing. Yeah, yeah. I
Yeah,
remember
yeah,
talking.
yeah.
I remember talking about this. Yeah, yeah.
We have spoke about this before.
Yeah, we have.
My favorite tag team, you'll never get this, so I'm just gonna
Multiple
tell
choice. Multiple
you.
choice. No, give me it. Give me it. Let's do it. Go on.
FTR, the Bucks. This is a weird one to throw in there, but Batista and Ray,
Right.
and then who's that? Red Dragon.
Well, it's not Red Dragon because you had to think about it. The Bucks.
Nope, Batista and Ray, which is why I was so
You
devastated.
tricked me. You tricked me. That was good. I like that. Well done. Well done.
Okay, who's my favorite wrestler of all time then, Dom?
Multiple choice.
Undertaker,
Yeah.
Danielson, Michaels, or Cena.
Well, you had to think about Cena, unless you're tricking me with Cena. I've seen you wear Cena merch as well.
Have you?
Yeah, one of your gym videos.
Oh yeah.
Michaels.
It was.
Yeah.
So this is 1A, 1B. Michaels is my old school favorite, for lack of a better word. But Danielson's my favorite current slash, you know what I mean, right?
Yes, I ended it on a win.
Well done,
Yeah.
Dom. So
Yeah.
as we wrap this up, Dom, I'm curious to know. Normally, I would ask my guest what is one piece of content they want to be remembered for. I won't ask you content I shouldn't be remembered for. Actually, I will. Just go curious to know.
No, right, no, hang on. You're thinking about this all wrong. Like, I mean, okay, I'm not going to tell you how to think about your interviews, man. But there's a lot to be proud of. There's a lot to be proud of. Like, you've interviewed people again that have never had a platform before, and I think that's wonderful. I think if I look back, I mean, we're talking over a year ago now. I mean, 4 years ago, innit? You've been doing this now 4 or 5 years.
It'll be 4 years this year.
Yeah, man. Do I want to? I don't know if I want to like criticize your work. Really, I've always admired. I've always admired what you do, and I always admired you learning from it. It's the one that I think you've learned. Maybe if is there one I think you learned the most from?
Because I know one.
Was it maybe the Adam one, but then equally, there's others. I don't know, man. I mean, I like most of yours. I mean, you even did one with a bloody CBT therapist. You know, you and I could do an interview about counselling, didn't you know? So there's loads I think
I forgot about that.
Yeah, they're just different ones, aren't they? They're just different, you know. And I think so. And I'm not trying to like blow smoke up your ass here, but I don't really. I've always watched your interviews and gone. We've got a different. You and I have a different style, but. But I don't necessarily think any of them are bad interviews because but that's my mindset. You know, that's how I approach these things.
Okay. And Ben will have asked me this question on the video that goes up next week because he's sitting down and interviewing me. But the one interview that I'm like, nah, don't remember me for that is I won't say the person, but there's an interview, and people that have watched it will know where, and I'm sure you've had interviews like this. I was done in 10 minutes because he was just getting yes and no answers and no like way to progress the conversation. Does that
Yeah,
make sense?
it
So there was
does.
a lot of like filling time sort of thing. Does that make sense?
Yeah, and some interviews are like that. That could be down to mood. It could be down to time of day. You
Oh,
know,
gotcha.
I know. For example, like it's always wonderful to see you, but like
You're
because I've
knackered.
because I've had a particularly stressful week and day coming in here. Even though I know that you know that I know you. That's some alliteration for you pretty well. The things you get caught off guard by certain questions, and so there's so many factors
Mm.
to things going wrong, etc., so but you've just got to adapt. You've just got to
Yeah, yeah.
adapt. I don't.
There's that interview that I'm like, nah, don't remember me for that. But I won't call the person out because I've spoken to them since and they're coming back on next year. So
There you go, absolutely, and that's the mark of a progressive, developing interviewer is the fact that you took a loss, right? You took an L, and then
mm,
you've come back stronger. You're trying
mm.
again, which is
I
awesome.
but I really think the one that people should remember me for currently, and I think this will be the same for a little while,
Yeah,
Is my Brian Zane one.
yeah, yeah,
Because again, if you go back, Brian was one of the people. He was a diamond. I interviewed him in early 2021. He was like, I have half an hour. I still had no format, no, no je ne sais quoi, shall we say,
yeah, yeah,
about
yeah,
interviewing. Still didn't know what I was doing.
yeah.
Sent him an email when I moved into this place, being like, would love to have you back on. Really feel like my content's grown since then. And he
Yeah,
actually sent me a voice message being like, yeah, will man, like really
yeah,
enjoyed our conversation last.
yeah,
And
yeah,
he sent me a message afterwards being like, I really enjoyed that conversation. Like
yeah.
you have
Good,
progressed so much since our
good,
last conversation. So I think that will be the one that I want people to remember.
good. And I think one of the good things about you as well is that you're very grateful. You're a very grateful person, of course. I know there are numerous wrestling YouTubers that preach and practice gratefulness.
Mm,
But I think, and being grateful for things. But I think, your tweets and stuff where you shout out people, I think is a brilliant
mm.
thing. You make people feel that's what you do. Again, you make people feel valued. And that's why people want to come back on because people care about you. I love, again, I want to hang out with you, so I don't mind spending an hour with you,
Mm.
and hanging out because it's cool to see you. But people that don't know you, they'll come back on because they know you're just a good dude who's trying to help people out.
I'm like me and Rob Wilkins have this conversation all the time because
Right.
I'm just someone that will check in on people. I'm like,
Yes,
I'm
it's
good.
important.
Like, I'll check in. Like, I'll send you a message
Yeah,
if we
you
haven't
will.
spoken in a couple of weeks, and I'll be like, everything all right, man? Need a
Yeah,
chat?
which is important, and I think that's great, and I think that's a really rare thing that you should be proud of, dude.
Before this gets too mushy, we're gonna wrap this up, guys. But Dom, thank you for coming back on. Also, just one quick question: how does it feel then to be my mentor, as I called you a few times?
Well, I mean, it's a lovely compliment. My journey in life has allowed me to support people. That's what I like to do with my life. Across sound sphere, wrestle sphere, screen sphere. I will do that, and I'm really proud of that. But with you, I think seeing where you came from and having that personal connection with you as I do, where we do check in with each other and we do message each other, seeing how far you've grown, I think is wonderful. And I remember you talking to me on our very first chat, even before we did an interview, about doing, working with Chris Van Vliet, because I think you discovered us through Chris Van Vliet and
I
interviewing
think
Chris
I
Van
did,
Vliet,
yeah.
yeah, which was done over the pandemic. And I remember you saying that was the dream, and here you've achieved the dream. So a lot of it, none of it can really be attributed to me. I mean, I'm happy that you think I've inspired you, and I'm happy that you've taken something from maybe some chats we've had. But fundamentally, man, you've put the effort in, you've put the
Mm.
work in, and that's really important. So, how does it feel to be your mentor? I just feel proud of you, regardless of mentor, regardless of whatever term you want to put it in. I just feel proud of you, mate, and I'm proud of what you've done, and I'm proud of how you've grown, and I'm proud of where you're going to go.
That's very sweet of you, Dom, and I really appreciate that. I'm an emotional person, so I'm going to wrap this up before I start crying. I'm not going to lie. But please promote yourself, my good man. Where can the people find you, your work, etc.?
I love this bit. Right. Okay. So if you're a fan of music, you can check out Soundsphere at soundspheremag.com. So SOUNDSPHERE. If you are a fan of wrestling, which I assume you are checking this channel out, the wonderful Tom Talks Rubbish, you can check out WrestleSphere. WrestleSphere, SPHERE.com. And most recently, if you're a fan of film, television, and games, so particularly horror and alternative, film, television, games, culture, you can check out Screensphere, and that's screensphere.co.uk, and you can see interviews with the likes of the Terrifier 3 director Damien Leone. We've just had Ewan McGregor. We've just had David Dasmalchian.
I saw this. I was really pleased with that.
Yeah, so very, very cool stuff going live there. Of course, on WrestleSphere, you can see interviews across TNA, AEW, and WWE. And on Soundsphere, some of the biggest rock, alternative, indie, and metal bands in the world. So go and check that out. And of course, as we are finishing up on Tom Talks Rubbish, continue to support Tom and Tom Talks Rubbish as he grows and develops and is just a genuinely awesome human being.
Well, thank you, kind sir. So if you guys like this, make sure you like, share, and subscribe to Tom Talks Rubbish, as Dom said, on YouTube. Follow me on Twitter or X if it's still around when this interview goes up, at Tom Talks Rubbish. And I will see you in the next one. Goodbye now.
Bye.
Thanks for watching this Tom Talks Rubbish conversation. Before you go, please make sure you leave a like on the video, share it around, and subscribe to Tom Talks Rubbish on YouTube, as well as follow Tom Talks Rubbish on Twitter/X.